Now, I'm no chemist, but I am infinitely fascinated by the process of chemistry and how these modern day alchemists can bend and break natural processes and materials to form compounds anew. All with the hope of understanding more about the world around us and at least try to help humanity. The only issue is, however, is that chemistry can harm just as much, if not more so, as it can help. Whether through malicious intent, extreme incompetence, or just a really tragic set of entirely avoidable circumstances. It giveth and taketh away and all that. And today's video is one such example of all three. A story about how a leak at a chemical plant caused an entire town to get filled with a cloud of toxic gas, which led to the deaths of tens of thousands of people. The Bhopal Disaster. Please leave a like and a comment on this video because it really helps me in the algorithm. But before we get into today's topic, a moment of your time. For I have some news to share. It involves you and that one bad habit that you've been grappling with. I know all about it, don't ask how. That doesn't matter. I'm here today to tell you about someone who's here to help, and his name is Fume. That's right, my luscious, loving laddies, my best friend Fume is back, and they're here to help you out. Who are Fume? Well, don't you fret, for such a convenient lack of knowledge can be rectified. Allow me to enlighten you. Fume is the premier in flavoured air devices that vows to help you with that one bad habit that's been haunting you. It helps you to return to your best self without any dodgy chemicals or blinking electronics. You see, Fume is refreshingly simple. A rock-hard and firm wooden chassis with a plumed, smoochable head that's classy. Fume's sturdy form is worth admiring on craftsmanship alone. But let me say, size isn't everything. Indeed, despite the deceptive simplicity, Fume has a wide catalogue of fruity and fancy flavours to fall in love with. From grapefruit to maple pepper, there is definitely a flavour for you. Let me tell you of how I finally overcame my doorknob weakness. Now, I thought that I was fairly orange vanilla, but I was experimenting the other day to see which one would make me peach blush. And after sampling some crisp mint, I eventually found the one who really stole my cinnamon heart. Let me just say, once you go black licorice, you never go back. So grab that old vape and kick him to the curb because he doesn't appreciate you, girl. And if you want to join me and over 300,000 people on your own journey to better habits, you need only scan the QR code on the screen or go to tryfume.com and use code Dankula to get a free topper with your journey pack. I appreciate the topper because I tend to use my teeth far too much and it helps me calm down. Again, scan the QR code on the screen or go to tryfume.com and use code DANKULA for a free topper with your journey pack. Now, thankfully, back to the video. Now, we all know India. Classic India. It sure is a place, a powerful country, and some would even say a pooper power. Okay, but really, India as a nation is something of a conundrum, with a rich and storied history going back thousands of years, paired with the largest population within a single nation in human history, and arguably the oldest continuously practiced religion. India had and still has all of the foundations to be a socio-cultural and economic Goliath, like their Chinese neighbours up north. And then they lost to a bunch of dreary island chimps a continent away and were subsequently occupied by 15 blokes and a bicycle for a couple of centuries who were all really fascinated by fucking leaf juice. To resist this injustice, the Indians started aggressively doing fuck all and were subsequently given independence for their British conceptualised United India for free, because Britain just couldn't be fucked anymore. And they were also very busy being fucked over by the Americans, but that's a story for another time. So what does all of this have to do with today's topic? Absolutely nothing at all. I just get snubbed by my Uber driver earlier and I'm just trying to clap back at him. And frankly, I would rather have a little bit of banter before we get into this extremely tragic story. But anyways, our story begins in 1905, when Everready, an American battery manufacturer, set up shop in the British Raj under the brand name of Everready. As you may intuit from their name, their main trade was selling batteries, mainly for imported flashlights and lamps, etc. Come 1926, they saw the light and decided to start opening domestic plants and factories for their Alan Wake pish. After getting incorporated as a private company in 1934, by the turn of the decade they had an arc carbon factory and battery plant in the world-renowned historical petri dish known as Calcutta, which is now known as Kolkata. In 1941, Everready merged with another company called Union Batteries to form another company called National Carbon. Deciding that this name is not marketable or vague enough, they then renamed to Union Carbide India, being slyly integrated into the multinational monolith of the same name. And for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to be calling them Union Carbide for the rest of the video. Now, why cover this very boring and needlessly complex corporate saga? Well, I need to establish just how involved they were in the Indian market, because by the 60s, they had one of the largest torch manufacturing plants in South Asia fully operational and based in Lucknow. I know that doesn't exactly sound super impressive, but still. They are a major player in a perceivedly niche market in what is now the most populous area of the planet. Before you had your smartphones, you had torches. Well, you still have torches, but truth be told, being able to see in the dark is quite fucking important. Especially when there's a real risk of fumbling around in the dark and running the risk of falling in the Ganges. That river has unironic FEV in it. And all of this brings us to 1969, in the city of Bhopal in Madhya Pradesh, where Union Carbide constructed a factory meant to manufacture Carbide, a pesticide that they were marketing under the brand name of 7. Like, the number. Though, quite obvious at this point, this factory would cause somewhat of a hassle in due time. Now, shockingly, due to the fact that manufacturing Carbide requires the usage of a lovely little chemical known as phosgene, it's unsurprising that there were already quite a few incidents on record preceding the big one, with 2 separate unions actually lodging complaints about the amount of pollution that was on site. This first culminated in 1981 when a worker got accidentally splashed with phosgene as he was carrying out maintenance work on one of the plant's pipes. Panicking, he for whatever reason removed his gas mask and he immediately took in a great big mighty sniff of phosgene gas. Fun fact, phosgene is extremely fucking poisonous, so sadly for our plucky pipe worker, he was dead within 72 hours. The management naturally shirked responsibility by blaming the worker for pulling off his mask, which, though true, does not invalidate the criticism that this poor bastard wasn't given adequate tools for the job, even lacking a basic PVC overall that has been virtually universal in such environments since at least the 60s. What an absolute calamity. Surely this was just a one-off event. No, it fucking was not, because not even a full year later, in January of 1982, it happened again. But this time, it affected 24 workers who all ended up being exposed and hospitalised on account of this gassy plant. On this occasion, it grows even more scandalous than the last time because the affected 24 workers were apparently not given any orders to wear their masks. Naturally, the 24 workers ended up kicking up a stink after the incident, but this went nowhere. And why was that? Well, just a paltry 7 months later, in August, wouldn't you know it, it fucking happened again. But this time, it happened to an engineer who had the misfortune of coming into physical contact with liquid methyl isocyanate, which is called MIC for short. And remember that name. Which, shock horror, is extremely fucking poisonous, which resulted in around a third of the engineer's body being extremely badly burned. And because fourth time's the charm apparently, it happened yet again not even 3 months later in October, when a lovely concoction of chemicals consisting of MIC, hydrochloric acid, and literal fucking chloroform leaked after an engineer once again tried to perform maintenance work on the pipes. Casualty report? Well, a supervisor and 2 workers were hospitalised with severe burns. For reasons that absolutely escape me, the Bhopal plant continued operations despite these very horrific incidents, with it being just a semi-regular occurrence throughout the early 80s. This naturally caused some less than ideal press coverage to circulate, culminating in an investigation and statement from journalist Rajkumar Keswani, whom prophetically summarised his major scoop in the local papers as such. Wake up, people of Bhopal, you are on the edge of a volcano. Things started coming to a head in October of literally 1984, when one of the storage tanks in the plant, tank E610, broke down. For context, the factory required dedicated storage tanks for liquid MIC that needed to be pressurised with inert nitrogen gas. This allowed the liquid to be pumped around and conveniently helped keep the MIC blemish and impurity free. The current issue, however, was that said inert nitrogen gas was able to escape tank E610, meaning that all 42 tons of liquid MIC was rendered unpumpable. Just like me, for real. Conveniently coinciding with this problem, the plant was shut down for maintenance, during which they tried to repair tank E610. And they failed. Meaning that this massive tank of literal liquid poison just sat there being unmovable. Golly, I wonder how this might go wrong. Well, it went very, very fucking wrong, actually, because it turns out that tank E610 was just the tip of the iceberg. Because, wouldn't you know it, almost everything in the facility was either outdated, damaged, or otherwise just plain unsafe to be around. Including the air scrubbers which were meant to vent out the noxious fumes actually being out of commission, alongside the steam boiler being fucked. And I don't need to get into the state of the pipes. The literal pile of corpses who tried to repair them in the past says plenty. During an attempted clean out of tank E610, it's thought that water seeped into the tank. This is bad. Because chemistry. And although the field may elude me with it being nerd shit and all of that, but when I read the words runaway exothermic reaction in the context of a 42-ton stockpile of literal fucking poison in an enclosed space, I can intuit that that's a really fucking big problem. And the staff would think so too, if they actually believed the readings they were receiving. As due to the widespread decay of all on-site tools, utensils and interfaces, apparently 2 separate senior employees independently read the tank go from 2 psi to 10 psi. And they concluded that it's bogus due to the reader clearly malfunctioning. Well, it turns out it was not malfunctioning. Within an hour of the water leakage, all workers on site were starting to feel the effects of MIC poisoning. And due to how comically common it was in that factory to get poisoning, basically everyone knew exactly what it was they were suffering from. And they immediately scrambled to try and find the leak. And they did find one, and they immediately reported it to senior staff, who promptly turned around and decided that they would deal with that little silly problem in about half an hour after their tea break. No, you did not mishear me. The senior staff delayed repairing a leak of poisonous gas, causing a site-wide gassing, because they wanted their fucking tea break. I guess some habits just stuck around since the Empire days, but this garish display of high-caste middle management farbery resulted in no action being taken until 1240. A full fucking hour after the leak was found. And by which point, tank E610 had reached a very, very plump 55 psi and started to buckle under the building pressure. And before you know it, the MIC that was inside the tank had turned into a gas and the tank erupted like the Tsar bomber. Do not release! Do not release! I'm sorry. The gas had started spritzing out into the atmosphere due southeast right over Bhopal because of the wind direction. And it was only now at 12:50 that Union Carbide actually triggered the plant's alarm. The one that would automatically broadcast an alert via a siren outside, warning the city about imminent leaks. The issue was, though, that due to how fucking common leaks were at this plant, it became company policy to shut the thing off because usually these leaks were contained within the plant. So, wouldn't you know it, after just a few seconds of broadcasting a potentially life-saving warning, the message was automatically cut. Meaning that the vast majority of the city was kept in the complete dark about the killer clouds descending upon them. Until a town inspector 2 kilometres away from the plant in the district of Chola decided to be a good Samaritan, and he rang the police to fill them in on a bunch of people fleeing from a fucking 40-ton cloud of poisonous gas. The police, rather concerned by the sounds of this gas malarkey, actually phoned the Union Carbide plant twice. To which, on the first occasion, the employees told the police that, no, everything is fine actually, how are you? But after the bodies started piling up in the streets, their tune quickly changed to, we don't know what has happened, sir. That last one is actually a real quote, by the way. And due to the rather enigmatic nature of Union Carbide, next to no life-saving information was relayed. Not that there was any problem, of course. Everything is A-OK after all. But when Hamidia Hospital eventually got briefed about a gas leak, they weren't exactly sure as to what type of leak it was. And that matters quite a lot due to, in no small part, the fact that you need to know what type of gas a person has been poisoned with so that you know how to treat them. Initially, Hamidia Hospital suspected that it was an ammonia leak. As the event progressed, however, that diagnosis then drifted to phosgene, getting warmer. Eventually, they were given the confirmation that it was MIC. However, here's the thing. The doctors and nurses were told it was MIC, not methyl isocyanate, the compound that the acronym is short for. They were just told MIC. They had no fucking idea what MIC stood for, and therefore had no way to prepare for it. The people in the streets of Bhopal were made very, very aware of the MIC threat when the mucus lining of their lungs started burning out and they all fell to the ground having violent seizures, alongside the bog-standard suffocation and dizziness. And you may snap back at this by saying that surely those affected could just get inside of a building, hunker down, put towels underneath the doors, and wait for all of this to blow over. But here's the thing. This is India that we're talking about, and not to be too mean, but even today, a lot of people in India live in homes that are hardly able to handle a bad spell of rain, let alone being insulated from a fucking toxic gas attack. So, what does this cloud consist of? Well, as previously covered, the vast majority of it is methyl isocyanate. Incredibly poisonous, not good. But there were also likely traces of such goodies as carbon dioxide, we all know that one, chloroform, dichloromethane, methylamine, dimethylamine, trimethylamine, all the fucking methylamines, as well as hydrogen chloride. An absolute smorgasbord of delectable delights that can kill you in seconds. And other than having all of the fucking methylamines, the cloud was also theorised to maybe have slight amounts of this odd little compound known as hydrogen cyanide. Though that can't be confirmed. Either way, you want none of this shit in your body. By 2 AM, tank E610 had finally spurted out the last of the toxins, and only 15 minutes later did the public siren start sounding up. Because it's cool to be fashionably late, especially as a first responder or an emergency broadcast that's supposed to warn people to get to fucking safety. And it was only now that a Union Carbide employee walked into the local police station and acknowledged that something might have happened, but it's been totally dealt with. We actually plugged the leak. Well, you plugged no fucking leak. The tank was just fucking empty now. And understandably, no one was fucking amused. The Indian government finally revved into gear and immediately quarantined the Bhopal plant to everyone, including Union Carbide. The chairman and CEO of Union Carbide, Warren Anderson, touched down in India with a full team of technicians to aid with the repairs and hopefully mend their shattered goodwill. And they were immediately put under house arrest by the central government and strong-armed into self-deporting, whilst the CBI, which is the Indian FBI, performed a full investigation into the event. The white New York millionaire got deported from India within 24 hours of arriving. Just imagine if the roles were reversed. Trying to claw back any face that they had left, Union Carbide responded to their CEO getting remigrated by organising a group of medical experts to aid the town of Bhopal and supply much needed medicine and equipment. So, how badly was this help needed, you may ask? Well, it's provincial India in the 80s. They were in dire straits medically even before the incident actually transpired. In Bhopal, it's estimated that up to 70% of doctors in the area were underqualified to deal with this sort of mass casualty event. And that frankly, nobody had any idea what MIC even was or how to properly treat it. Trees within the vicinity of the plant went barren, with around 2,000 goats, buffaloes and other such animals being put out of their misery and buried. There was a massive food shortage due to quite reasonable fears of all food stores being contaminated by the gas. I mean, yeah, Indian street food is lethal enough, so imagine how bad it must have been for even the Indians to not want to eat it. Deciding that the plant is far too dangerous to just keep around, the decision was taken to rip out tank E610 and just dump it outside, as well as drain the other two MIC tanks. Now, how do you go about draining such materials? Why, you restart the entire plant and just continue producing pesticides, of course. And wouldn't you fucking know it, this caused another mass evacuation of Bhopal because no fucking shit. So, in the immediate aftermath of the disaster, the food stores had been completely destroyed, the town had been rendered completely uninhabitable for a while, so the entire population of Bhopal was now completely fucking homeless, and they couldn't even go back into the town to collect the essentials that they needed because it was too dangerous. And people in hazmat gear had to go in and remove the literally thousands of bodies that were lying in the streets. So, here comes the court cases. Just as a quick aside, the Indian government came under fire the second that they got involved due to the lack of transparency in their investigation. These claims come from the Indian government's repeated failure to make public certain data, and overall adding to the absolute insanity of the incident. I can't say I'm shocked, as these Brahmin super geniuses greenlit reactivating the plant despite the maintained stockpile of super toxins that got them into this mess in the first place still being in there. So, understandably, legal action was absolutely fucking guaranteed. However, we're talking about thousands of Indians going up against a chemical powerhouse in a courtroom, so the chances of getting anywhere meaningful would be pretty slim. Right? Well, the Indian government decided to be a bunch of cheeky wee sausages, and they passed the Bhopal Gas Leak Act, which allowed them to represent all victims in a courtroom, and as a result, levelling the playing field. Meaning, it was now functionally always going to be Union Carbide versus the Indian government. Despite this quite even matching, the initial offer put forward by Union Carbide was something of a lowball, to say the least. After initially denying that they were liable for anything, they hit out with an offering of $5 million in the form of a relief fund. Surprisingly, the Indian government turned down such a generous deal. So Union Carbide realised that they were dealing with somewhat of a tough negotiator, and they folded, offering a bit more of a concession, totaling $350 million, and they hit out with the argument that the money would generate a fund for Bhopal victims of between $500 to $600 million over 20 years. And damn, that does sound quite enticing and a lot more appropriate considering the circumstances. So surely, India had to accept. Incorrect. The Indian government retorted that an adequate deal that they would be willing to accept was no less than $3.3 billion. A very daring raise. Let's see how it works out. Well, seeing as by this point the court had transferred from a US one to an Indian one, the odds were definitely stacked in Bharat's favour. Though, due to excessive highballing, India got diminishing returns and had to bow out, settling with Union Carbide for an initial payment of $478 million up front. Alongside this, Union Carbide ended up having to dish out $17 million on constructing a hospital in Bhopal. Hopefully, they also dished out the money to actually train the staff this time. So, what the fuck went wrong? Well, other than the blatantly obvious of corporate negligence, inadequate regulation and equipment, underinvestment, etc., what Union Carbide actually claims was the cause of the incident is none other than sabotage. As a report composed by Arthur D. Little on behalf of Union Carbide claims, apparently a rogue employee partook in some industrial espionage and disabled the perfectly working water meter and connected a hose to the port to fill it with that perfidious H2O. Now, is any of that actually true? Well, honestly, it really doesn't fucking matter, because at this point we're squabbling over the whodunit when no matter what, people lay dead in the streets that didn't need to. And seeing as I've not brought it up yet, so let's get on to the Indian elephant in the room. How many people were killed? Well, estimates vary due in no small part to the fact that medical unfamiliarity with MIC meant that there was probable misdiagnoses, and we should go with the most conservative estimates. So, there were around 3,787 people killed in the first 24 hours. Or, if you want to go all the way on the estimates, some put it up to 16,000 people killed in the first 24 hours. For the Americans in the audience, that is a minimum body count of 1.26 9/11s. Up to a maximum potential of 5.34 9/11s. But that is just the first 24 hours. Thousands more died in the coming weeks because of the after effects of breathing in the poison. Some took even longer to die, and many people had their lives severely cut short, and many people developed severe breathing difficulties and other such health complications that stuck with them for the rest of their lives. The aftermath death toll is a lot harder to calculate, however, because these deaths all happened in the years or decades after the incident. So it's very difficult to attribute them directly to the incident. But I think it's safe to say that when it comes to these deaths, breathing in a big fancy cocktail of practically every single chemical substance that exists that is bad for you definitely contributed. Some researchers suggest that the actual full death toll of the Bhopal disaster is somewhere between 20,000 to 100,000 people. In terms of the non-fatal injured, we have a minimum of 558,125 people. And that's the fucking minimum figure. The maximum estimated injured in 9/11s, of course, is 22.32 9/11s. And this is not just me being a crude and edgy prick and using 9/11 as a pseudo-comedic reference scale. This is also meant to try and convey just how massive this tragedy really was. Because when it's just numbers on a screen, it starts to get really meaningless past a point. And being real, most of you in the audience have a much more solid grasp on the scale and impact of 9/11. Now just imagine 9/11 in India. I know the joke that you all think I'm going to make, but nah, it's too easy. Mass funerals were commonplace throughout, with pictures being taken of them that I'm obviously not going to show. But either way, the scars that the Bhopal disaster inflicted can still be felt even to this day. Whether that's with the widowed and orphaned, or the disfigured and stunted. With Bhopal suffering from a myriad of birth defects and a very high infant mortality rate even 40 years after the tragedy. Even the soil and water around Bhopal is still to this day very heavily contaminated. There are even some ponds around the site itself that you can't even stand near for more than a few minutes without running the risk of fainting. All because some fucking idiots were being too stingy with their funding, too blasé about regulation, and being far too adamant about their tea break. And hundreds of thousands of people paid the price for it. And very understandably, Union Carbide fell into ruin, being sold off and completely rebranded as Ever Ready Industries India. And they still operate to this day. From the cursory glance that I took, it seems like they've thankfully kept their head above board, even apparently branching out into making and selling tea. That's like really fucked up, but also kind of weirdly funny. I think this video is a very good example of unfeeling corporations once again causing mass destruction and murdering a bunch of people, and then thinking that saying, oopsie, I'm such a Gemini, afterwards is going to cut it. And even though corporations seem like these big, godlike institutions, they're all actually really fucking stupid.
It's Count Dankula on YouTube! Everybody just subscribe!